Welcome to another episode of The Corner Booth, the official podcast of restaurantowner.com. Today, the restaurant industry is changing faster than ever. Learn from successful independent restaurant operators and other industry leaders as they share best practices that will help you engage your team, delight your guests, and grow your business.
And welcome everyone to another episode of Corner Booth. I'm Chris Tripoli with restaurantowner.com. Today, what we have for you is going to be a learning experience about growing and brand management of an established brand in the QSR niche. And I know that's of interest to many independents who spend a lot of time in the QSR niche. We have Heather Neary, who is the president, CEO of Taco John's, with us today. So, Heather, thanks again for setting aside some time. Welcome to Corner Booth.
Thanks, Chris. I'm happy to be here.
Well, before we jump into what a day in the life might be for your role and some of the details of QSR today, it might be good to share with our listeners a little bit about you. What first got you interested in hospitality, and how did those maybe early influences pay off?
Yeah, I think my story is not uncommon in our industry. Needed a part-time job, grew up in a very lower middle class family and outside of Philadelphia in Pennsylvania. My parents said I had to have a job when I was old enough to get a job. And so I went to work at a cheesesteak shop of all places outside of Philadelphia. My dad's friend from high school owned a cheesesteak shop. And I went to work for Frank and learned how to make cheesesteaks, learned how to run a restaurant, really enjoyed waiting on customers, enjoyed the fast-paced nature of the business. I actually worked for Frank off and on well past high school and into college because he would call me as he needed me to help out when somebody was on vacation or whatnot. But I also took jobs when I was in college at restaurants. I learned to serve. I was a bartender for a while. And I just love the industry. I love being social. I love the fast-paced nature of it. No 2 days are ever the same. I guess It speaks to my need for chaos. And so I graduated from college with a degree in English literature and was going to pursue my quote-unquote degree discipline and worked in publishing for a few years and was honestly just bored to tears. It was it was a monthly print publication. I'm now dating myself back into the 90s, 1990s, going back back a century or so. And I was bored to tears and decided that wasn't going to work for me. And so I reinvented my career after 4 or 5 years out of college and started over as a marketing manager at Auntie Anne's, the pretzel place. I had moved around a little bit. I'd gotten married in the meantime. My husband was in the Marine Corps and was going to be deployed for a year. So I decided to go back to my hometown of Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And I took a job at Auntie Anne's thinking I'd stay for a year. Loved what I was doing. About 6 months into it, decided that my husband was going to need to figure out how to keep us in Pennsylvania with his military career. And we managed to make that work. And so I was able to grow my career at Auntie Anne's. Went from marketing manager to director of marketing to director of international marketing to CMO I also became the CMO that oversaw all of operations without a title change. So I was at Auntie Anne's for 15 years. I spent the last 5 years as the president of the brand, but I love this business. It's a ton of fun. The people are the best part of the business. I will never not love the people I get to work with every day. I love being in the franchise space. I love franchisees. I love being in restaurants. I love spending time with folks in restaurants. I left Auntie Anne's at the end of 2020 after a 15-year career there and moved to KBP Brands, which is, I think, the second or third largest franchisee in the U.S. KBP has Taco Bell, KFC, Arby's, and Sonic. 1,000 units. And I oversaw the Taco Bell brand for them and was there for about 3 years on the operations side as the president of the Taco Bell business for KBP. Learned a ton, did a lot of M&A work, did some real estate work, did a lot of work on the operations side as the president of, a franchisee side of the brand. I also learned to only enhanced my appreciation for the franchisees and the work that they do. So when Taco John's came calling, I was initially not interested, but I learned a little bit more about the brand and what the challenges that we were facing and decided it was something I wanted to explore. And so I've been here, about a year and a half now and have a lot of fun. We're a 56-year-old brand now. A lot of great legacy operators in our system, a lot of fun history of the brand, and a lot of great brand cues that we just need to be harnessing to tell a better story to our consumers.
Well, there's a lot there. And yes, I want to talk about so much of that. There are a lot of listeners, small growing independents, that are very interested in growing through franchising their brand. I'm sure you'll have an awful lot of lessons learned, do's and don'ts to share. Before that, though, I just have to compliment if you're starting out as a teenager and you're in Philadelphia or anywhere around Philadelphia, of course you're going to work with
Of
cheesesteak.
course. I
I mean,
made a
it's
mean
a
cheesesteak.
natural. I mean, you can't, I mean, that's one of the greatest food towns and food areas that we have. It's just
Yeah.
fantastic. Love my time chowing there. So love that. So happy that you connected with it, that even after majoring in something else and then using your major, you decided, no, forget it. It's boring. I got to get back into the biz. I mean, that's,
100%.
yeah. That's phenomenal. That's phenomenal. Okay, so there's a couple of really big things to talk about. Let's talk about that experience that you had even before you got to Taco John's and now, and that is managing franchisees, being a large franchisee, being a franchisor of franchisees. Could you take a few minutes and describe how the relationship works? Because I think some people, especially when they're first starting to set up franchising, are confused about how franchisees might just sort of be, I don't know, extensions, almost like managers that they're managing, and we all know that that's not true. So, could you walk us through a little bit about that process that, that you've been successful at, obviously, for years?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting dynamic, right? It's not strictly a employee-employee relationship, not by any stretch. It's not true business partner relationship. It's more, it's an interesting dynamic. Franchisee, franchisor is one of those unique relationships in the business space that I think is misunderstood by a lot of folks. I had the good fortune of growing up in the Annie Ann system. There is an Auntie Ann. There is an Ann. She's still around. She sold the company in 2005, shortly after I joined, but has remained a great figurehead. And her philosophy was always to focus on collaboration with franchisees. At the end of the day, our franchisees are the ones that are in their restaurants every day, and their voice and their perspective is absolutely critical for our success. It's important that we also keep that perspective in mind as we make decisions because they are in their restaurants day in and day out. And sometimes their perspective is limited by the four walls of the restaurants they operate in. And as the owners of the brand, it's really important as franchisors that we establish really logical and well thought out standards, processes, and procedures to help our franchisees be successful. At the end of the day, I'm successful as a franchisor if my franchisees are successful.
Makes great sense. It makes me very good sense. So, yeah, for those of you out there, already have your 3 or 4 units, and you've been getting through the, legal issues, and you're developing your franchise agreements, and you're doing all the registration, and you're excited about how you're gonna go about, selling your franchises. Maybe we could get a little bit of input right now about the importance of the selection. What is it that maybe you look for when you're selecting a franchisee, someone who's actually gonna be, more of a ambassador of your brand? What do you look for?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, Chris. There are First of all, when you're beginning the franchising process, it's super, super critical that you've got strong standards and strong processes and procedures and training in place. Those early franchisees will set the course for you for your success or not. And so those early franchisees are a little bit like, explorers exploring the new world and learning how to do this with you. And they're usually pretty entrepreneurial and excited about being part of the brand. But remember that it's also a 20-year relationship that you're about to embark on. So, your franchise sales team is in the process of dating and courting that franchisee. But then once they become part of your system, your operations team is now married to that person and that
Yeah.
franchisee. And, precedents that you set and exceptions that you make and, deviations from your standards with those first franchisees set the tone for how your entire brand will be run.
Excellent. That's right on target, of course. And what a mouthful, making sure before you even select that you really are clear about your concept, the standards, that you're really well prepared, systems, policies, procedures, et cetera, and your training is done and you've got your team in place.
Yeah.
Because I just think that too many people might start this process and they're not totally prepared. But boy, I really love what you talked about. The selection isn't going to be so much about capability as much as it is compatibility. You got the date
100%.
boarding, you've got the marriage. It's like a family member sitting at the Thanksgiving table. It isn't. So I guess you really have to look at it that way when you pick your franchisee.
Yeah, I mean, on the Annie Ann side, I was there 15 years, so I saw a lot of things happen in my 15 years. It didn't happen often, but if a franchisee is not quote unquote following the rules during their training process, you need to have a ripcord to pull there. Like you need to be prepared to say, this isn't going to work because if you're not on your best behavior during the training process, chances are that's only going to get worse when they actually get their restaurants open and start running their businesses. And so I think things that, you're excited, you're eager to start growth, be very careful, be very selective. Make sure that person that you're partnering with is somebody that you want to quote unquote be married to for the next 20 years. That's really what it's about. And, we didn't do it often at Annie Ann's, but there's a handful of times where we had somebody in training that just could not follow the rules or could not follow our standards. And we had to end that relationship. And we were fortunate at Annie Ann's that we had a lot of folks that wanted to be franchisees. So we could be very selective. But I think it's incumbent upon all franchisors for everybody's benefit to be very selective from the get-go and to not hesitate to pull that ripcord and say, this isn't working. This is missing the mark. Before we get further down this path, we're going to walk away.
See, so what I'm hearing is that sometimes a good case of independence isn't necessarily what's going to make the best franchisee. I mean, if they really, really and truly want to be in business, for themselves, by themselves, then it sounds like that's what you need to bless them to go do. Because if they are going to maybe question, not necessarily follow, be difficult in training, you're right, they're going to get out there and they're not going to be the best ambassador of your brand because they're thinking a little bit more, independently. So it sounds like a good franchisee is somebody who's really compatible with the culture, almost in love with the brand, and gets great satisfaction of being more of a follower.
Yeah.
Give me the rules, I'll charge the hill kind of thing. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best franchisees are sophisticated business people who really understand the benefit of a franchise organization. And that's that you get to go run your own business and be your own boss within the guardrails of the brand that you're operating in versus having to do all of it yourself. So I think the best franchisees are really sophisticated business people who understand the benefit of being part of a franchise organization.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Thanks. Let's switch gears a little bit now. Taco John's, I know it's only been a year and a half, in your role, but can you give us a little bit of some general information, amount of units, where you're at, a little bit of what your roles and responsibilities are in a position that big?
Yeah, so I've been here like a little over 18 months now. 1969, we were founded in Cheyenne, Wyoming. Two gentlemen who unfortunately are no longer with us, but we're still family owned. So those two gentlemen, their grandchildren and their children are actually our owners now. And fabulous brand founded on, West Mex hospitality and quality food. We're differentiated by our freshness cues and we're differentiated by our West Mex mentality. We operate really, really well in a lot of small towns. Our growth potential from my perspective is huge. It's also a brand that has been kind of like operating on autopilot for quite a while. So we've got a lot of great franchisees who are eager for what's next. And I'm excited to be here to help collaborate with them to take the brand to the next level. And some of that involves closing some underperforming restaurants and closing some restaurants that, haven't remodeled and aren't willing to remodel. And so some of it is pruning some of those underperforming locations to get us to a better place for growth. And so I've been here about 18 months. We've got almost an entirely new executive team that's here that I've worked with. Almost all of them I've worked with in my prior lives, one way or another. And it's been a lot of fun to work with the franchisees and collaborate. We did some branding work last summer. There's a ton of equity in Taco John's and what the brand means and stands for. And there's so many things that we do well here that we just haven't been talking about. So, We fry our taco shells fresh in the restaurants every day. We make our pico de gallo fresh from scratch. We make our ground beef fresh in the restaurants every day. There's a lot of things we do well. We just haven't done a great job of communicating those messages to our consumers. And so we're in the middle of a brand refresh. We're focusing on, our North Star is quality, and we are focusing on the West Mex, menu items and mentality. And it's a little bit of a renegade cowboy out there having a little fun, a little tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
Again, we're not reinventing the wheel. We're not changing who Taco John's is. We're just enhancing what we've already been doing for many, many years and bringing that more to the surface versus being kind of behind the scenes.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, again, I am a little familiar and I have been to the units, and I personally understand a lot of the difference between what people might look at, depending on what part of the nation we are, and on how we look at fast food, Mexican food, West Mex. I reside in an area where, of course, Tex-Mex is what we call the king.
Yeah.
But throughout the nation, the Mexican food is a little bit different. So I really am honing in on your comment there, where it's not like we're reinventing the wheel. And that's true. And I hope the listeners get that growth and success doesn't need to mean that creativity is always, and we're trying to do something that's never been done before. But it's kind of picking your spot, having differentiators, and then building from that. And so you've got a tremendous brand, and the West Mex and the freshness seems to work. Can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about the units, seating, drive-through? All of them are some of them inline, and have you gotten into some of the more non-traditional locations like schools, arenas, airports?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Largely upper Midwest based brand, about 350 units. Most of our locations are pad site standalone. We have a handful of inlines. I think at this point we probably only have a couple that don't have drive-throughs. Those are older units that have been around for quite a while. But by and large, we've got drive-throughs. We do the third-party delivery like everybody else does. But we do really well in smaller towns. We're in a lot of really unique little places around the country, upper Midwest, that just have really awesome people who have fond memories of Taco John's from their childhood. They've now grown up and then they're bringing their children into Taco John's. And I've had the good fortune of being able to visit a lot of those locations over the last year and a half. And I just love talking with guests who walk in and we'd start chit-chatting, and they clearly know the employees know them.
Nice.
And they all have really great stories to tell. So we're kind of taking a lot of that nostalgia and harnessing it into our brand story and our brand messaging. Again, we don't have a huge budget. We're not like our competition that has 7,000
Sure.
plus units. So we have to be creative with what we're doing, and we're having a lot of fun with it in the process.
Well, let me tell you, your listeners don't have big budgets either, and they're definitely honing in and taking notes of what seems to be working for you so they can maybe kind of put it into, perspective for them as well. But are most of these units, or just a small portion of the 350 franchised, or how does
Almost
that
all of them are franchised. We only have
also?
seven company restaurants. So
Got
on
it.
top of driving top line sales, which is 100% critical for our growth, the other piece of that puzzle, Chris, that we're really focusing on is improving unit level economics. Each
Okay.
restaurant's got to make money. And so we're looking at everything. We're renegotiating contracts, we're looking at equipment, we're looking at speed of service. We're going through a lot of things within the organization to make sure that each franchisee is as profitable as possible, to make sure that each franchisee is driving profitability, not only through top line sales, but, cleaning up that middle of the P&L, helping them with labor, helping them with COGS, helping them with speed of service, and then also just, eliminating complexities wherever we can.
Yes. Yes, I can see how that would be a top priority, especially since, as you mentioned before, the more successful the franchisees are, then the more successful your brand is. And
And the more they want to grow with us.
well, that's true. That's true. Secondary markets really work. I like that approach, and I'm hoping that the listeners make note of that. Not every success story has to be because they're in the biggest urban market where they're, fighting more wars for good sites and paying twice what they should for real estate. Secondary markets are good building markets, especially if you, and I think you have a few of these that might fit where they're a small market built around universities.
Yeah.
And yeah, you get into that school thing and you're busy. Is your menu lunch, dinner the same? Do you
Breakfast,
have
lunch,
a
dinner.
you do have a breakfast component.
We do a very strong breakfast component, actually.
That's good. What kind
Very
of
strong
percentage of
breakfast.
sales now can come from a breakfast
It's definitely the smallest piece of our business in terms of, percentage, but I do think it's great to have that breakfast component because we are able to drive sales during a time when we already have labor in the restaurants doing prep work for the rest of the day. And so
Yes.
we do serve a full menu beginning at 9 a.m. The restaurant's open at either 6 or 7 a.m. and the
Mhm.
menu is sold beginning at 9 a.m. So we actually sell quite a few, tacos and burritos at 9 o'clock in the morning. And I don't mean breakfast burritos. I mean, an old-fashioned crunchy taco at 9 a.m.
You
And
gotta
so
do it.
our guests want that from us, and we're here to deliver what our guests want from us.
Well, I'm in. I mean, I personally would like to start every day with breakfast tacos and strong coffee, and I'm in.
100%. Right there with you.
Okay, so now I've got to ask you about what you mentioned a little earlier about brand refresh, and then that's on your, it's obviously part of your role and responsibility, and it seems to be one of the priorities there, along with the unit economics that you miss. So, right now, it seems to be where a lot of people are licking their wounds of what we've seen in public that happened with another very well-established brand that talked about brand refreshing. I'm referring to the recent issue with Cracker Barrel. And whether that was really all, customer or whether it really was sort of a bot response. Anyway, there was such an online, I guess horrible negative response. And there's a lot of us in the industry that are now taking notes and trying to assess that. How do companies really do this right? This is a part of what we need to do is stay on top of how our guest customer profile is changing, how younger dynamics might need to be attracted. And so here you've got a 56-year-old brand, and you mentioned already brand refreshing. How do you go about that process correctly where you don't, maybe invite some of this unbelievable overly negative that can happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I don't. I'll just speak strictly about our experience here. I've been part of a brand refresh at Auntie Anne's. I've been part of a brand refresh now here at Taco John's as well. At the end of the day, it's about listening to your consumers and
Okay.
collaborating closely with your franchisees. I know the consumer research really told us that consumers loved us and they were curious to learn that we did all of this fresh stuff. So we weren't really doing anything different. We're just talking about it. And so that coupled with sharing the results with our franchisees, specifically our franchise association, and collaborating with them on taking this research that we did, this body of work, it really gave us a lot of data points and a lot of insights, and collaborating with our franchisees on what does this mean for us moving forward. And I think a lot of our franchisees, many of whom have been with the brand for many years, in some cases, they're second generation
Mhm.
franchisees, which is super exciting and fun for us to talk about. But
Yeah.
they also were like, this makes sense. Like, we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're not trying to be something we're not. We can't compete with the Goliath. So we're going to be the David and be lean and mean and really creative and innovative in what we do. And we're going to just focus on what we're already doing and just talk about it more. So for us, it's really been about highlighting our heritage, highlighting that we've been around since 1969, highlighting that we came from Cheyenne, Wyoming, highlighting our freshness cues and all the things that we are already doing in our restaurants to really stay true to what the guests told us they want from us anyway. So we just took what the
Yeah.
guests told us and we just followed that line out through realization and commercialization.
Great. Great thing to follow. 2 points there I hope everyone is making. You've got that extensive research, engaging with others, franchisees, management staff, guests, to get the data points that you're interested in. I heard that loud and clear. And then I love the second one. When you execute this, you're building from a point of strength. You work with what works. You're known for freshness. I get it. They love the history, the secondary markets. So kind of build from your position of strength and expand from there. Gosh, it sounds great. Is this brand refresh marketing as well as franchisees doing, say, cosmetic updates, signage, furniture, and the kind of thing that they have to do every once in a while anyway?
Yeah, so it's part of our remodel and refresh programs at the restaurant level for their actual physical structures. But again, we've dialed that back as well, Chris. Like, we looked at what they were spending and we were like, wait a second, we need to make sure this is as affordable as possible. So in many cases, we kind of created, a multi-tier approach. If it's a really high volume restaurant that needs a lot of cleanup work because they're doing so much business, we've got a tier for that. But then if it's a middle of the road restaurant that needs a refresh, but we don't need to spend $1 bajillion on that, we dialed that back and created a secondary tier for them as well. We call that our refresh program versus a full remodel. We wanted to make it we need to keep the brand fresh and relevant to our younger guests. And we also need to make sure that it makes sense from a cost perspective for our franchisees. Again, profitability is really key here. The most profitable franchisees are the happiest. They want to grow with you. They want to talk fondly about your brand to others. And so profitability continues to remain a key focus for us here at Taco John's.
Great. Well, saying and profitability is something that I want to touch on a little bit because I know a lot of people are concerned with the way the last year or two really have been with rising costs. Your franchisees are facing rising costs with whether it's occupancy, utilities, rent, real estate, large markets, small markets. And then once they start operating, there are issues with things just simply cost more. But what I've kind of learned from that is that the consumer has sort of developed a different sense, and I want to get your comment on this, a different sense of value. As prices are going up, it seems like value is being redefined as not just cheap, but value seems to be defined as worth. Is this package, was this worth my time and my money to order the number 6 at the drive-thru window? Am I seeing either portion freshness? Am I getting some service? So it seems like it's getting more competitive on that end, and it isn't just price. Now, am I reading the tea leaves right?
Yeah, I think there's two different stories there. I think one of them is really around the value-driven consumer, and that's the consumer that's a little bit more price sensitive. That consumer is also seeing their own personal expenses increase. Their car insurance has gone up, their homeowner's insurance, their cost of living has gone up. And so we want to make sure that we're an attractive option for all of our guests. So that means having a lot of value options for price conscious guests while at the same time talking through things with other guests who are not as price conscious, not as value driven to make sure that's moving forward.
Excellent, because there's no way in the world that people can say that I used to go to, this my favorite place and get my breakfast tacos or get my
Right.
number 4 or get my combo platter and I paid, X, and now they got to go there and they have to pay a little bit more. And that is the way it is no matter where they're comparing it to. Industry numbers that I'm reading now look like the QSR that used to be sort of an average of $6 or $7 a person is higher. And I'm thinking now we've got fast casual, counter service, even some casual big guys marketing what you can get there for $10.
Right.
And it's going to kind of put the value mindedness of the QSR drive-through window guys.
Yeah, I mean, we're taking two different perspectives there. So we've got a $5 meal, a $6 meal, a $7 meal. We've got a $1.79 snack wrap option right now for our guests. But
There
then
you go.
we're also at the same time advertising a more premium version of our ever popular meat and potato burrito. We've taken our meat and potato burrito, we've plussed it up a little bit, made it a little bit more fun and exciting. And that's definitely a premium price item. They're both selling well. It's kind of the barbell strategy in marketing where you've got a value-driven consumer and a less price-conscious consumer. And we've got options for both of them. And we want to make sure that they're both choosing Taco John's for their meal options.
There you go. I love it. And the barbell approach to marketing. That's good.
Yeah.
So you got to hit them both barrels, and it seems to be working. Can we talk a little bit about use of technology and what parts of QSR seem to be impacted most and best that you're rolling out to your franchisees, whether it's behind the scenes efficiency or whether it's more use of marketing programs? Maybe a third choice, is there really labor savings that we're seeing due to the use of technology or not?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've introduced, and it's now optional for all of our franchises, we've rolled it out system-wide, is we've got drive-through AI technology, where the drive-through voice is actually a woman who is artificial intelligence. Again, we want to be conscientious of making sure that every guest has a great experience, and not every guest wants to talk to an AI voice. And so what we've seen with that, it wasn't necessarily put in place to cut labor, it was put in place to optimize labor. So instead of having to have two people on the drive-through, we could have one person on drive-through, and then we've reallocated that labor onto the food line to make the food faster so that we've got better throughput, so the guests have a better experience. We've introduced that system-wide. There are some markets where they don't like the AI, and so we're not
Okay.
doing it there, and that's fine. But
Yeah.
there are lots of markets also where it's a great win for us, and it's a great opportunity for us to be more efficient in our restaurants, for us to reallocate labor to the line to increase that speed of service for our restaurants.
God, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. And then is there any particular equipment uses, any newer things that either help you hold product, prepare product, anything that maybe we didn't have, years ago, but now we can use technology for that helps with the management of product behind the scenes?
Yeah, it's interesting you asked that question, Chris. We're actually looking at every piece of equipment in our restaurants right now because in many cases, there are unintended consequences with some of
Yeah.
these items. And so we are actually in theory kind of looking at it from a different perspective, and we want to make sure that the quality is as good as it can be. And so we're actually looking at some things that we used to use that we have stopped using. We're looking at bringing those back because they actually deliver a higher quality product. And at the end of the day, we believe our guests want the highest quality product possible. Saving 3 seconds off of the production of that product might sound great, but if we've ticked off a customer, we don't want to lose any customers. And so we've taken a little bit of a different approach to that conversation. And we're looking at the equipment in our restaurants to make sure that we're delivering the best quality product possible to our guests.
What a good way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there is. I mean, there seems to be tremendous improvements, that I'm seeing in the way people can now utilize warmers and grills and steamers and holding machinery that really are better and can improve quality that years ago, we just didn't have.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, we're also looking at a lot of data on the back end to really understand our guests and what they're doing with us and their habits, their frequency. Are they coming if they're a breakfast guest, are they coming more often because they're a breakfast guest? If they're a lunch guest and they came on a Wednesday, what does that mean versus a lunch guest that came on a Thursday? What does that mean to their frequency? Excuse me. Are they coming in the evening with their families, so therefore their order's bigger? And do we have the right
Yeah.
options for them to order with their families and their children? All of those questions are things that we're doing on the back end as a responsible franchisor to make the best decisions for our menu and our marketing materials.
Sounds great. Could we talk a little bit about just maybe what a day in the life is like for somebody who has the role and responsibility of a CEO? You've got the company units, mostly a franchise operation. Yeah, our listeners are not necessarily directly related to a position like that, but I'm sure pretty interested in what's life like when you've got to manage something at that level.
Yeah, one of the reasons why I came back into the hospitality space was because I appreciate a fast-paced environment. I appreciate a little bit of chaos. I will say there's probably no 2 days that are alike. I will say one of the first things I do, I am an early riser. I'm a 5 a.m. girl. Big, big fan of the 5 a.m. Club. If you haven't read that book, it's a great book. But I'm a big fan of getting up, getting going, understanding what our sales look like the day before, digging into whatever things that are out there that I can quickly look at and get a quick snapshot. Throughout any given week is probably easier to understand. I'm talking to my board members, I'm talking to my ownership group. I'm always talking to franchisees. There's probably not a day that goes by that I don't talk to at least one franchisee, if not more. I'm working on right now, we're in the midst of 2026 planning. So we're
Yeah.
we're we're trying to finish our fourth quarter strong, and we're also trying to make sure that we're setting ourselves up for success in 2026 and beyond. So there's a lot of time spent on forecasting models, on projections from different marketing opportunities that we have, and what else can we be doing to drive sales and traffic at our restaurants.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I wish you the best with it. If we could just do a quick little crystal ball, if we talk, say, 3 years from now, where are you going to be? What is Taco John's going to look like in the 3 to 5 short-term plan?
Yeah, I mean, we do have a 3-year plan that we finalized this summer with our board and with our franchisees. And our 3-year plan is really about responsible franchising. It's
Okay,
about excellent operations, and it's about constantly attracting and retaining guests to come to our restaurant. So new guests. It's all about driving sales and traffic, but
got it.
but doing it in a way that's profitable and responsible for our franchisees.
Well, those seem to, I mean, that has it covered.
Yeah.
I mean, if anything that can do to improve operations while driving more traffic, bingo. I love that commitment, though. The top one is the commitment to franchisees, and it's
Yeah, I think making sure that our teams are all working together too, right? We can't have our marketing team operating in a silo from our operations team. And that's when I took over operations at Annie Ann's while I was the CMO, it came about our head of operations had left the company. I was the CMO at the time. Our CEO and I were chatting one day and he said, do we have internal talent to promote? Do we bring in from the outside? And we had a conversation that went back and forth for a while. And I said, here's a crazy idea. I said, I know there's always been that tension between marketing and operations. I said, what if I took over all of operations and brought them under one umbrella? And he was like, that's not how we do it here. And I was like, okay, fine, no big deal. He came back to me a few days later and he said, I've been thinking about your idea and I think it's pretty bold. He said, I'm going to give you 6 months to try this out, but I'm not changing your title and I'm not giving you a raise. And I said, accepted, challenge accepted. And so it wasn't 6 months, it was 6 years before I became president of the company. But we really worked hard to bring marketing and ops under one umbrella. So the marketing team understood the challenges the operations team faces in the restaurants. And the operations team understands the marketing team is really just trying to drive those top line sales. But having that relationship and understanding who we each are as a person and as a human being really leads to stronger relationships and ultimately stronger results.
Yeah, that's priceless. And what a great setup then to run large operations with franchisees. Whereas we said at the start of this, it is a unique way of sort of coordinating, leading, supporting, engaging, and not at all a traditional, corporate supervisory management staff kind of thing at all. So that's great. I know, how could somebody turn that down? If someone comes to you and says, listen, I want to give that a chance. I want to merge these operational and marketing positions. I want you to lead them. Okay. I don't want it to be a different title. I don't want it to be any different money. I just want it to be double the work. Now have fun.
I mean, I don't know if I was foolish or not, but I think it worked out pretty well for me.
I should say so. And really, the principles that you just laid out are the ones that really work. The best brand managed companies that I know, whether they're large or small, have a great connection between the marketing initiatives and the operational consistency. If operations really understands and marketing really, well plans and supports, then, the companies seem to work really well. They can't really be, as separate as they are, sadly, in some cases.
Right.
Well, this has been so much fun. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Wish we had more time. Love everything that you're doing. Wish you the tremendous success as you continue to improve, grow, refresh, and attract more franchisees to Taco John's.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much. And for everybody else, listen, go make it a great shift. Hope you had a good, enjoyable episode. Hope we can cross up quickly on another Corner Booth. See you soon.
Thank you for joining us on the Corner Booth. We'll be back next Tuesday with more inspiration, insights, and industry best practices to help you engage your team, delight your guests, and grow your business.